Socialism should be banned.
Okay, I know I said there wouldn't be a new episode of Rocking Mystery anytime soon, but he just put out a new video where the title alone, I had to watch it, and I thought it couldn't possibly be as stupid as the title. The title's just inflammatory. It couldn't possibly be that stupid. But I watched it and it was, so therefore there will be a new episode, which you are now watching. Though I need to prepare myself for this episode, so we will prepare ourselves for a new episode, Bad Philosophy with Rocking Mystery, and we will move forward.
This is going to be one of those videos that gets concerned trolls going. Either it's going to be egotists that have no concept of what personal responsibility is, or it's going to be socialists trying to defend their ideology.
Starts out with an ad hominem. Egoists, or egotists, is what he actually says. Starts out with an ad hominem. It's just funny that he would, the irony of him calling anyone an egotist, if you watch his videos. Like this whole opening with him playing the guitar. And if you watch his videos, which I've watched many of them, how often he just runs his hand through his hair. And just the vanity. His videos could not possibly be more vain. So calling anyone an egotist, rather hysterical.
For the latter, most won't identify as socialist and will instead lie about what they advocate, muddying and revising arguments along the way. I'm no stranger to this sort of behaviour, but even so, I know that this video will likely attract more of it than usual. In spite of this harassment, I feel that this video has to be put into the public domain. Why? Because after over 3 years of research and learning behind this channel, I've grown to realise that socialism justifies theft and murder, and until it's banned, humanity is going to keep repeating the mistakes of the past, where this ideology has murdered more people than any other in history.
Okay. He's going to do the thing he does, lump everybody who is remotely to the left of him, which is almost everybody, into one group of people. That's what he always does. You can't do that. You can't do that. Rockin' Mystery actually isn't a real libertarian. He is a, what you would call he's really a paleo-conservative. Examples of that would be Pat Buchanan and Alex Jones. They have the hardcore anti-statist and economic views of a libertarian, but mixed with crazy authoritarian or theocratic viewpoints when it suits their purposes. Paleoconservatives vary greatly in their viewpoints, but they are they vary from traditional republicanism, which would be along the John Locke views, a lot, and they are not consistent like libertarians are. Libertarians are at least consistent in their ideas about personal liberty. So paleoconservatives are not. Rockin' Mystery, his abortion viewpoint, and some of his other viewpoints obviously show that when it comes to stuff that he doesn't like, he's all for authoritarianism, as long as it's just what he personally doesn't like.
First, let's clarify what a socialist is. A socialist is just another word for a collectivist. It doesn't matter whether we're talking about fascists, communists, Fabians, Marxists, theocrats, or some other type of collectivist. They all come from the same mould. More specifically, socialists believe that all rights come from the approval of authority. Without this authority, there is no individual autonomy, and therefore individuals have no rights. It doesn't really matter what this authority is. It can be a panel of technocrats, religious leaders, an emperor, or something else. Whatever the case, the conclusion is still the same: totalitarianism. You can tell that socialism is the same as totalitarianism when you compare the two. Totalitarianism is a political system where the state holds total authority over the individual, which is exactly the same premise as socialism. Even the idea of a state is an abstract one designed to dismiss the fact that statism is just another adjective for authority. If it seems as though I'm using lots of words to describe the same thing, that's because socialists deliberately try to make language incoherent in an attempt to hide their evil intentions. Sadly, there are plenty of people out there that enable this strategy, be it deliberately or unwittingly.
I know I sound incoherent, but it's because of the evil socialists. They're making me incoherent. You can't understand what I'm saying. The socialists control what I say. That's why I don't make any sense. It's because of the socialists. But seriously, totalitarianism would be a system where you as a citizen do not have any outlet to influence the government. You cannot speak out against the government. You cannot protest. You cannot influence the government in any way. You cannot participate in the democratic process. You cannot run for office. You as the average citizen. This is reserved for either a special class of people or certain kinds of ideologies. Like, you must agree with a certain kind of ideology in order to be a part of the government. That would be a totalitarian state, which is significant considering what he's going to say as we go on.
The major objection to banning socialism is going to be on free speech grounds.
No shit. But here, like, he can't possibly be saying anything that's as bad as you think he's going to say, right? Like, obviously he realizes, like, you can't limit free speech, right? You can't limit it.
Before I refute this argument, let me first explain what I mean by banning socialism. Specifically, I am referring to banning socialism in all public spaces, particularly any political movement or party. To ban something outright is not only impractical, but also unnecessary. As long as people can't harm others with their actions or values, then their beliefs are their own. For example, if someone is a racist that only wants to associate with white people, then they should be free to do so, up to the point where their beliefs incite coercion or force.
Now, he used a great example here of a racist. Because obviously, yes, in this country, like, we let neo-Nazis have free speech and rallies. Some countries in Europe do not allow this. The United States does. We allow them to express their ideas, and we criticize those ideas, but we do not limit their ability to express those ideas. Now, neo-Nazism could be argued to be, I mean, Nazis killed millions of Jews directly. Like, you could make the exact same argument. You cannot express race views. You could make this about anything. Anti-theists could argue that any religion should be banned. Theists could argue that atheism causes mass murder. And they have argued it because of Stalin and Mao, which are the same people he's going to be talking about when he's blaming socialism. They blame it on atheism. He's going to blame it on socialism. So which is it? Which is the factor that caused them to kill all those people? Was it their atheism or was it their socialism? You cannot do that. There's nothing inherent. He's going to argue that there's something inherent about socialism that advocates murder. Which, once again, he makes a bunch of references to utilitarianism, which I hate utilitarianism, perhaps more than he even does. But he basically associates socialism with utilitarianism, which it is not really associated with at all.
Previously, I made a video where I explained that the idea of free speech cannot exist unless people are responsible for their actions. So, if I spread a lie about someone raping a woman, then I should be punished for my actions. And this should be exactly the same principle behind anything that someone says or does.
Somebody raped a woman? That never happens. That would obviously be a lie. But, Rocket Mr. E, when he's talking about free speech, obviously, yes, free speech has limits. But here's the thing. Depending on which video you watch, Rocket Mr. E, rights either have limits or they don't. In fact, in the same video, he'll contradict it. I did the abortion one last time. He contradicts it in the same video. And here's the thing. If free speech has limits, then why doesn't property rights have limits? Because he doesn't think they have limits. He doesn't think they have limits at all. And I can make a persuasive argument why they should have limits. Property rights should have limits. And property rights are actually one of the harder things. Like, property rights are, as Ayn Rand pointed out, kind of linked to your right to life. Because your right to property has a direct relationship to your right to life. And your right to autonomy. So, it's directly linked to those things. So if you can prove that your property rights, like you already have enough property to preserve your life and preserve your autonomy, then arguing that you have the right to acquire more property has no philosophical basis whatsoever. In fact, in the Communist Manifesto, Marx and Engels argue that inheritance should be eliminated. And I don't think inheritance should be completely eliminated, but I think it's okay to tax people's inheritance. And you even find on the left here in the United States people arguing that you shouldn't tax inheritance, which is insane because these are the same people who think progressive taxation is okay. Like, you can tax people for what they work for, but you can't tax their inheritance. It's insane. The United States, like, your capital gains income tax is less than the tax you pay on money you work for. And your inheritance is less. That makes no sense whatsoever. Now, the limits I would put on free speech would be inciting a riot and direct threats made against a specific human being. And, like, say, like, shouting fire in a crowded theater. Like, those things the Supreme Court in our country have deemed to be limits on free speech. Now, the example he uses is slander. And slander is not a criminal act, it's a civil. You can file civil suit against somebody, but they can't be, like, thrown in jail for slander. So his example sucks. But in the United States, I don't know what it's like in the UK, I don't know what it's like in other countries. I know there's different laws for slander, but in the United States, you not only must prove that what the person said about you is untrue, but you must prove that they knew it was untrue. And then you also must prove that it inflicted damage on you. So, convicting or getting a settlement for slander, getting money from somebody for slander is actually very hard to do.
Having explained this, let's move on to why socialism should be banned. Socialism endorses theft and murder. This is a fact both historically and theoretically. What makes this even worse is that socialists will happily lie about this by muddying terminology. This is an acceptable strategy to them because socialists are consequentialists, and so their entire moral framework comes from believing that the end justifies the means.
Now, in my previous video, I argued that Rocket Mr. E is a consequentialist. In the previous Rocket Mr. E video, the abortion one. And he is. Like, video after video after video, he makes consequentialist arguments for things. Over and over and over and over again. Now, a libertarian would have to be a deontologist or something else. Like, a consequentialist libertarian makes no sense. He's in fact the first kind of, as I've argued before, he's not really a libertarian. He's pretending to be one. But, like, he's the first person I've ever come across who claims to be a libertarian who shows, like, a consequentialist viewpoint. Now, I argue that Ayn Rand's a consequentialist, but she never claimed to be a libertarian, but she is. Because there's very few things that she differs on libertarianism on. So, socialists are not consequentialists The idea of human rights comes from Kant, who he argues is a relativist in a previous video. Our idea of human rights is Kant-derived. It's derived from Kantian ethics, which is deontological ethics. Because rights would have to be rule-based. They have to be deontological. Because consequentialism is malleable by its nature. So, if you believe in any kind of rights, once again, Franklin Roosevelt, who was called a socialist his entire presidency, wanted to add a bunch of rights to the U.S. Constitution. But left-wingers don't believe in rights, according to Rock and Mr. E. Oh, yeah. I remember what I was going to say. Murder. Like, how does socialism endorse murder? I understand how he thinks it endorses theft, because his definition of theft is all weird. But how does it endorse murder? Inherently in socialism. Like, you'd have to prove it inherently. You can't say, like, there's a socialist who murdered one time, so therefore socialism is pro-murder. Like, because there's lots of capitalists who have murdered, I can't, like, say capitalism is pro-murder for that reason. It makes absolutely no sense. I should stop drinking now.
Socialists advocate theft through wealth redistribution and the confiscation of private property. They do this first by pushing for more and more taxes and tariffs that people must pay to avoid being punished, and second by claiming that private property is theft, even if earned through voluntary trade and commerce. People have no choice whether to be a part of this or not, since logically speaking, you only have a choice in something if you aren't punished for opting out.
Like, autonomy and choice is like a hard thing to define. Like, technically, you would really only have a choice if you had decisions that all had equal benefits and consequences. Like, you had a bunch of decisions that had equal benefits and consequences. They're all proportionate to each other. And then, because when we make choices, a lot of times, like, one choice is obviously better than the other. Like, the idea of coercion and this idea of choices is actually very philosophically complicated. You could teach a whole class just on that. Like, really, you could. So, the idea that he just simplifies it, oh, like, if you're not... here's the thing, like, there's economic coercion. Like, in capitalism, there's obviously coercion. Like, if you can't find a good job, you have to take the job. Like, say you're born poor, you have to take the job. You can't afford college because there's no such thing as student loans in your government, or there's no such thing as grants, and you have to take the job that, because capitalists, you have to be stupid to think capitalists always do, like, the market is magic, and capitalists always do what's good for society. Now, sometimes the market does, like, a smart capitalist will do things, like Costco is a good example. They're a company that actually pays their employees a living wage and gives them good benefits, and they reap the benefits of it. And the thing is, like, libertarians are like, well, Costco chooses to do that. And you're like, well, why don't all the other companies do it? And they go, they can't afford to do it! How can they not afford to do it if Costco's doing it and it's giving them more profits? How can they not afford to do it? So, like, there's only two things that can be true. Like, either Costco is doing something wrong, in which case, why are they getting so profitable? Or the other companies are doing something wrong. And according to the theory of capitalism, they should always be doing the right thing because the right thing always leads to more profits.
This opens up a whole can of worms when it comes to the morality of taxation. Whatever one believes, one thing is certain. Socialism advocates for very high taxes and tariffs, as well as progressive taxation, by far the most unjust form of taxation of all, given that it stifles entrepreneurship and discriminates against hard-working people.
In my previous videos, I talk about progressive taxation and why it's fair. I could make a whole video just on progressive taxation, and I might do it at some point. But
revolutionary socialists advocate mass murder, and this is the most brutal aspect of socialism that is constantly whitewashed from history. All revolutionary socialists believe in purges, where certain types of people are wiped out before a new utopia can be socially engineered from the chaos.
A revolutionary socialist does not mean a violently revolutionary socialist. I am personally not a revolutionary socialist. I'm a democratic socialist. But that's not what that means. It doesn't mean violence, necessarily. Like, there are people who... a revolution does not mean violence. Like, a revolution can occur that is non-violent. So, straw man right there.
To get people to go along with this disgustingly inhumane agenda, socialists constantly try to polarize a culture. This is carried out through identity politics, arguably the most appalling divide and conquer strategy you can work towards. Socialists take a certain group of people and work hard to make them identify not as individuals but as a group, commonly referred to as groupthink. Instead of looking past demographical identity such as race, class, sex, or sexual preference, socialists stoke the fires of social tension by suggesting that all problems pit entire groups of people against one another.
Okay, he defines groupthink. Groupthink is when people are afraid to speak outside the group. It happens in pretty much any kind of organization, any kind of government. He's actually advocating for that, actually. He's saying that only libertarians should be allowed to express themselves in the government, or people who agree with him should be able to express in the government. So he's actually advocating for that. And then saying, oh, but socialists are for groupthink. And like the real problem, it's a thing, Friendo, a YouTube vlogger, he made a response to Rock and Mystery about feminism, and he talks about, like, don't women have the right to express their concerns as women in society? Like, don't they have the right to do that? Because who are you going, like, one person you can't do anything. But if you have a bunch of things in common with a bunch of other women, then together you can do something. Same thing with race, sexual orientation, all these things. He's obviously like screaming, I'm a white male and I'm so oppressed, and like a lot of his videos. So I don't understand what he's really fucking talking about. He like has this fucking whole like white male persecution complex working for him.
Through identity politics, socialists brainwash people into believing that nuanced issues are caused by an entire demographic oppressing another, as opposed to human corruption found in all aspects of life. They then capitalize on this tension to acquire political power. Instead of realizing, for example, that slavery was a problem that occurred right across cultural and historical lines, socialists not only paint white people as the only ones that advocated slavery, but try to suggest that only white people benefited from it. Obviously, there were white individuals that did happily benefit from slavery, but this was always pushed along by a ruling elite that repressed the majority. Anyone that tried to go against this risked life, limb, and being ostracized.
I'm not sure what the fuck he's talking about anymore. But here's the thing. Yeah, there was such a thing as black slavers. Yeah, people know there was such a thing as black slavers. What the fuck's he talking about? He's talking about, oh yeah, only white people enslave people. Here's the thing, though, like, I encountered this because of my study of religion and people I talked about religion. People talk about how the Bible advocates for slavery, which it doesn't. I mean, it does and it doesn't. Like, the slavery that exists in biblical times and the slavery that exists in ancient Greeks is not like the slavery that existed in the American South. It was more like indentured servitude. It did not extend to your offspring, and it usually was for a certain number of years. So, and sometimes it was for punishment for a crime. Like, you had slavery for a certain number of years as punishment for a crime. So it was like, essentially, like when we like make inmates pick up trash along the road, we are doing slavery by like the biblical and Greek definition of slavery. This is insane. Like, I don't really understand what he's talking about. Like, socialists enforce this. This is actually just true, though. In the American South, we enslaved a bunch of Africans, and white people benefited from it for the most part. But there were opportunistic black slavers, both in Africa and the United States, who benefited from it. What the fuck is he proving with this? I don't understand what he's arguing with this. He's doing this whole like, oh, white people are oppressed. We're always portrayed as the bad guys. Poor white people. That is his whole argument here. I don't understand how it's an argument against socialism. I don't know how it's an argument against anything, because he's just saying, oh, how dare you? How dare you say such bad things about white people? We're just like anyone else. Just because we're white doesn't mean that we're bad.
Though all socialists rely on identity politics to divide and conquer, not all socialists take it to the extreme of purges, where those of a certain demographic are murdered. Nonetheless, all socialists use identity politics as the basis for theft and coercion. They will also use identity politics to destroy meritocracy and replace it with a totalitarian dictatorship that decides who gets what opportunity.
So, he just admitted, yeah, not all socialists like advocate murder, just like some of them. But we'll still ban socialism because of theft. Then why'd you bring up fucking murder in the first place, you moron? Why'd you bring it up in the first place? If your whole argument was based on theft, why'd you bring up the murder thing in the first place? Because you just wanted to say murder a bunch of times? Is that why you wanted to fucking bring it up in the first place? Why'd you bring it up in the first place? Because you're just like, oh, but not all socialists advocate this. But let's ban all socialists anyway. And as far as like socialism advocates for a totalitarian state, it would be like a state where we said that people with certain ideas couldn't form a political party or state them in a public forum. It would be like that. Who would want to live in a society like that where people with certain ideas couldn't have a political party or state them in a public forum? Who would want to live in that kind of state? That's what socialists advocate. So let's make sure socialists can't form political parties and say things in public forums.
Therefore, socialism is most definitely an ideology that incites violence, theft, murder, and group animosity.
You just said not all socialists advocate murder and violence, you moron. You just said it a fucking minute ago.
Topping it off with perpetual lying to present malevolence as compassion. Whether some are stupid enough to believe socialism is a compassionate ideology is irrelevant. If the outcome is theft and murder, then it has no place in a civilized culture because innocent people are harmed. Most people that argue for free speech will say that the line is crossed once people incite violence or crime. Clearly then, the only way you could argue that socialism should be endorsed in public is if your definition of theft or murder is not a rational one, where a victim has their property or life taken from them.
Well, you already conceded that not all socialism advocates murder. So we'll take that off the table because you conceded it within your own video. So we'll take that one off the table. Alright, let's make the argument that socialism advocates theft. Let's hear that. Let's hear what it is. Other than just claiming that taxation is theft. Let's see you logically, philosophically claim. Because you're such a genius in philosophy. When I commented on your videos, you told me, like, you can't tell me anything about philosophy.
For those arguing that socialism does not lead to murder, they need to study history. In the 20th century, socialism was either a direct or indirect cause of the mass murder of 262 million people by the state. This doesn't even include casualties of war, and is especially true if we use a more accurate definition of socialism in relation to collectivism and totalitarianism.
Okay. I've already been over this. You get this all the time. Watch any argument between one of the new atheists and a Christian apologist. It'll always end with them going, no, religion killed more people. No, atheism killed more people. It always ends like that. It's absolutely ridiculous. It's stupid. Like, you're a dumb fucking... You are just like... You're functionally retarded. I'm just going to say... Nothing against you. Like, I think the state should give you benefits because you're functionally retarded. But... You're functionally retarded, Rocky Mystery. You gotta realize this. So... I mean, already you've proven this over and over again. And I want the state to give you benefits. Because I don't think you should die just for being stupid.
All the revolutions in South America, Africa, Asia and Europe were either influenced by socialist ideology or directly carried out in the name of socialism. Perhaps you could say that this video is actually arguing for the banning of collectivism, but it's socialism that's the first step towards totalitarianism because it can be used to gradually implement a dictatorship.
So let's not gradually implement a dictatorship. Let's just start one right up. Let's say only people with a certain political belief system and certain political values that can't be really argued for in any coherent way can express themselves in government.
Many a dictator has been aware of this, so banning socialism is the first step to ending collectivism forever. Yuri Bezmenov, an ex-KGB agent, once showed that the only way to stop leftist ideological subversion is to prevent socialism before it even begins to have an effect on the masses. What a shame that moral cowards would rather protect the free speech of people advocating theft and murder than help to prevent totalitarian ideologies from turning us into slaves.
The argument he just made is the ends justify the means. Why would you protect the free speech rights of people over the obvious consequentialist benefits? He just told you how horrible consequentialists are and socialists are consequentialists, but he just made a consequentialist argument. I was waiting for him to make one this entire video because I knew he would. After demonizing consequentialism, he would make a consequentialist argument because he always fucking does. The biggest fucking idiot on YouTube. So, Rocket Mr. E, let's talk about his hypocrisy, okay? He talks about how men are hardwired to be some way and women are hardwired to be another way. He's a stay-at-home dad. He admits it on his blog. And he goes, some people say that feminism allowed stay-at-home dads to exist in the first place. But I disagree. Well, make a fucking argument for it, moron, because it's fucking incomprehensible. You argue over and over again in your videos that women are hardwired to be some way and that men are hardwired to be another way. You call men who support feminist causes manginas when other MRAs think you're a mangina because you stay at home and take care of your kids and let your wife support you. You fucking piece of shit. You argue that for this capitalism utopia while you stay at home and don't work. You're a fucking hypocrite. I have no problem with you staying home and taking care of your kids. I think there's nothing wrong with it. But you're a fucking hypocrite. You aren't a quote-unquote real man by your own standards. So, fuck you, Rockin' Mystery. I may be drunk, but I'm still smarter than you, even when I'm drunk.